So we will start with the brief notes on the prototype modeling, which have been discussed in the last class. So in prototyping model, first requirements gathering will be done. Initial requirements gathering. Based on that, the development team will be creating one kind of a prototype, a non-working model of the requirements which have been given by the customer, and it will be defined by the different kind of customers inputs which have been given by the customer to the developer, and the developer side or the company will build a prototype, and the customer will be given with that prototype which have been built by the developer. So what happens after that? There is a continuous evaluation of the prototype will be done by the customer until he satisfies, until the customer is satisfied with the prototype, the design will not be started. So once the prototype which has been built by the developers have been satisfied by the customer, then he can advance with the design, implementation, testing and maintenance by using iterative development model. So why it is approaching iterative development model? Because it is continuous process. Prototyping model always contacts with the customer for the requirements which they need. So regular communication will be established between the developer and the customer. So what happens here is different types of prototypes will be designed and inputs have been taken from the customer. Based on them, the iterative approach will be made. So the next prototyping model is iterative development model. Next prototype, that is next development model is iterative development model. So it is one kind of a model in which two models have been combined. That is waterfall model and prototype model. Both of them have been combined. At one stage, waterfall model will be used in this iterative development model. And at one stage, prototype model will be used. So we can say that iterative development model is a combination of waterfall and prototyping model. So let us define what are the things are there in this iterative development model. So the main purpose of the iterative development model is to counter the limitations of the waterfall model. It means the drawbacks which have been there in the waterfall model, out of which two have been concentrated in this iterative development model. They are all of nothing and requirements bloating. Now, what are these two limitations which have been mentioned in the waterfall model? All or nothing is nothing but when we are when a customer is giving under waterfall model, we are discussing about waterfall model limitations. When a customer is giving inputs and the inputs have been freezed, until then the customer will not be interacting with this developer. Until the product has been designed, the customer will not be interacting this developer. So what happens here is the customer is not able to guess what he is getting. So the developer will be giving the design based on the requirements which have been freezed initially. He will be giving all at once. So it is one kind of a risk. And next one, that is one kind of a limitation. The next limitations, which is part of the waterfall model, is requirements bloating. So waterfall model encouraging the changes should be done. So changes may be there because requirements bloating are nothing but the customer are filled with different types of requirements. So waterfall model is not allowing that kind of a thing, because once the requirements have been freezed, Waterfall model says that we are not, we cannot gather requirements again. So that is what the limitations as part of the waterfall model. So the second point, it mentions that it combines the benefits of prototyping and waterfall model. So we can say that iterative development model is based on the combination of prototyping and waterfall model benefits. So in this model, first of all, some specifications will be given by the customer. Specifications are nothing but requirements. And based on that specifications, there will be a development of first version of the software will be made. After the first version of the software has been made, let us think that the customer needs more changes to it. Then what happens? The new version of software will be created based on the new type of inputs which have been given by the customer. That is called as a new iteration. And next, what happens here is, it is an iterative model. So every release of the iterative or every iteration, there will be a exact and fixed period will be maintained. And this is called as iteration. I will repeat these 3 points once again. In iterative development model, based on the basic requirements, a first version of the software will be developed. Let us think that there is a need to change something in the software based on the customers. So what happens? The older version will be upgraded with the new version of the software, and it is created as one iteration. So like this, there are several number of iterations will be made to develop an exact picture of the software. Next, in the iterative development model, it can allow accessing the earlier phases. You try to understand this one. In the previous models, what we discussed in the waterfall, exactly waterfall model, it will not allow the previous phases to be accessed once again. It will not go back. So the iterative model allows the accessing earlier phases in which variations made respectively. So based on the requirements, because every time iteration is followed, in the first iteration, one kind of a design will be followed. In the second iteration, the second inputs will be followed. Third iteration, the third inputs will be followed. Like this, there are several number of iterations. So based on the previous iteration results, the second iteration or the third iteration will be continuing. So updates of the previous. So there will be an existing system will be there. You will be updating with the new things to the existing system. So the final output of the project will be at the end of the life cycle process of software development. So we can get the output or the total project after completion of the software development lifecycle process completion only. So this is what happens in the iterative model. Here there are 3 iterations. For example, it has been given. We assumed only 3 iterations here. It may be more than that. In the first iteration, what happens here is initial requirements will be there. Based on the initial requirements, there will be analysis will be done. On those analysis, design will be done. Testing is also done and implementation also done. Then after that, there will be a review. It is nothing but there will be some kind of a review. First iteration will be shown to the customer, and based on that, the customer will be giving some kind of a feedback. He needs some more changes. Then the developing team will be going for the second iteration based on the new requirements. So already there is one kind of a system, that is iteration 1. So we are adding the second iteration, some more features. It means that there will be an existing system. We are adding some more features to it in the form of its iteration 2, iteration 3, and so on. So this is what happens with the iteration development model or iterative development model. So this is what happening. Enhancement is going on. First iteration, second iteration, and third iteration. Like this, the analysis and requirements will be gathered based on different types of iterations. So we will be seeing what kind of phases are available in the iterative development model. We will come across these things. First one, we have requirements gathering and analysis. So SDLC is defined by the different models in different ways. So that's why, according to iterative model, the SDLC is nothing but software development lifecycle, will be different. So here, first phase, which is part of the iterative development model, is requirements gathering and analysis. So in this phase, requirements are gathered from the customers and it will be checked by the analyst whether the requirements are fulfilled or not. Then analyst checks that the need will achieve within the budget or not. After all of this, the software team skips to the next phase. So what happens here is, first requirements will be gathered according to the customer and the analyst will be there. Based on the requirements, the analysis will be done whether it will fulfill the needs of the needs like budget or resources. So what happens? Requirements will be gathered, analysis will be done, whether they are suitable for the project or not. Then they will be going for the next phase. The next phase will be design phase. In the design phase, the team designs a software by different diagrams like data flow diagrams, activity diagrams, class diagrams, state transition diagrams. These are various diagrams which are part of the unified modeling language, UML language. So I need to talk about these things because when a person is called as a developer in a software company, if a software company is developing a project, it means that you will not be giving a software in the form of a document alone. Document which contains only the text. It should also contain the diagrams also. So diagrams are easy way of understanding any kind of a project. So that will be maintained here. So design phase, team designs the software by different diagrams, data flow diagrams, activity, class diagrams, state transition diagrams. These are various types of diagrams. Now, according to data flow diagram, so it will be depicting what kind of a data is flowing from one module to the other module. So data flowing from which module to which module and how they are flowing. So in the second diagram, that is called as activity diagram. In this diagram, we will be concentrating on the participants or the actors involved in developing a particular application. So who will be the user and who will be the developer and what kind of a users will be there if an application is developed. So that will be depicted in the activity diagram. So in next diagram, that is class diagram. A class diagram contains the module's description. Let us say that our project contains 3 modules. First one, login module, registration module, design module, and the customer module, user module, and administration module. There are a lot of modules are there. So to represent those modules, we will be using one diagrammatic representation of them. The diagrammatic representation is called as class diagram. Next, one more diagram is there, that is state transition diagram. It means that what is the state of particular module. According to the diagrams, it will be depicted. So this is about design. Next, in the third phase, in the implementation phase, so all the requirements which have been gathered and analyzed and designed in the design phase, they will be written in the coding language and they will be transformed into programs which are called as software. So in implementation phase, we are trying to write the code for the requirements which have been analyzed under first phase and second phase. According to that, we will be using one kind of a programming language and the programs will be written for the development of the software. In the fourth phase, that is called as a testing phase. After completing the coding phase, software testing starts using different test methods. There will be different types of methods, but most common of them are white box testing, black box testing, and gray box testing, and other methods are also there. So let me give you a small introduction to the white box testing and black box testing. So white box testing is nothing but the inputs will be known and the outputs will be assumed to a particular model. Let us say that we have an add function. According to programming language I am discussing. So if you have an add function which is operated on two integers, you know that what sort of inputs will be getting into them, into that function. So there are two integers into it. So what kind of output you will get, you will also know that. That is in the form of integers only. If you add two integers, the output will be also an integer. So this is about white box testing. The inputs and outputs you may know. So what is the internal of this thing? The processing of the thing will be revealed by the white box testing. But according to black box testing, you will be know the inputs and the outputs, but what is the internal logic you don't know. Black box is nothing but the internal logic will be in hidden nature. Inputs will be known, but outputs will not be exactly assumed, because based on the internal working of it, the testing will be done. So these are the basic testing strategies which have been implemented by the several software development technologies. First one is white box, second one is black box. And the gray box testing I will discuss in the coming classes also. Don't worry about that. Next, we will getting into the fifth phase. After completing all the phases before it, that is until 4 phases, software is deployed to its working environment. What do you mean by this, a working environment? So deployment is nothing but once the software has been built, that must be put into the customer's system or the client system. Okay, that is what called as deployment. After installation, we will be giving with one kind of a copy to it. Documentation will be given to that. How it works, you will be mentioning all those things to the customer. Next, after deployment, there will be a review. Sixth phase will be coming into the picture. In this phase, after the product has been deployed, review will be performed. Review is for whether the software is working fine or not under working environment, like customer at customer side, whether it is working or not, there will be a review will be made. And if there is any error found, then the process starts again from the requirements gathering. So what happens here is, after deploying the software onto the customer system, customer's end, if there is any problem, then it starts again. That is requirements gathering again. Iteration will be starting once again. Next, seventh phase, we have maintenance. In this maintenance phase, after deployment of the software in the working environment, there may be some bugs, some errors, and new updates are required. So this maintenance phase will be dealing with those things. So bugs, errors, updates are will maintained or addressed in this phase, maintenance phase. Maintenance, you know that when you buy any product, any machine, there will be a maintenance for them. After 1 year or 2 years, annual maintenance, AMC, we will say that one. So what do you mean by this maintenance? Because after 1 year, the system may not work according to the previous. Let us say that when it purchased, the system will work fine. After 1 year, whether it is working with the same capacity or not, we will be maintaining such kind of things. Solving such issues are done under maintenance phase. So here comes a question that when to use this iterative model. So the answer is when requirements are defined clearly and easily understood, or when the software applications is very large, and there is one more thing, that is requirements keep on changing in future. So when these types of things are encountered, these kind of things are possible, then iterative model must be adapted into development of a software. I will repeat these three things once again. When the requirements are defined clearly and it can be understood easily, when the software application is very large, it means that it is not suitable for the small projects, small applications. It is suitable only for the large projects. That is what iterative development model gives us. Next, when to use the iterative model is if there is a requirement that changes in future also, then compulsory you will go for the iterative models. So next we will be discussing about what sort of advantages lies with the iterative model. So as we said, iterative development model is a combination of waterfall and prototyping model benefits. And iterative model has its own uniqueness also. The uniqueness of the iterative model is nothing but iteration strategy. So once iteration has been adopted by this iterative model, testing and debugging will be very less. So it means that testing will be done very easily, less number of steps will be used in testing, and debugging is also done at smaller levels. Next, the second advantage which has been mentioned here, that is parallel development can plan. What do you mean by this? So iteration first, when first iteration has been started, the second iteration can have a plan also. So we can plan for the second iteration also. While the first iteration is continuing in progress, the second iteration, that is new features that are supposed to be added to the first iteration, that can be planned parallelly at the time of developing a software. That is what the second point. The third point changes something like this: easily acceptable to ever changing needs of the project, obviously, because iteration approach is specially meant for the changes. So at first iteration there will be some kind of requirements are there. In the second iteration some more requirements will be added. Like this, keep on adding the needs of the customers. So it is one kind of an advantage. Risks are identified and resolved during iterations, because as we said, we are keep on changing, we are following the iteration strategy. So what happens here is we are adding new features to the existing system. Why I am saying this one? Because after completion of the first iteration, it is called as the existing system. When we come across the second iteration, we will say that the proposed system. So there will be an existing system and there will be a proposed system. So to the existing system, we are adding some more features, those features part of the proposed system. While adding the new features to the existing one, what sort of risk can be happening? So that adjustable nature is also there during the iterations. Next, here important point is one more important point, last advantage, that is less time is spent on documentation and extra time will be spent on designing. So this is one kind of an advantage, because without designing, if you are keep on writing the text, if you are keep on concentrating on the documentation, what do you mean by this? It means that the design will be in pending status. That is what the drawback in the waterfall model also. Waterfall model relies on the documentation. relies on the documentation. So that will not be happening in the iterative development model. That is, less time will be spent on documentation and more time will be spent on designing. So these are the several advantages which lies with the iterative development model. Next comes our disadvantages of iterative development model. See, every model has its own advantages and disadvantages. So we will be concentrating on benefits of it based on the requirements, based on the type of the applications. We will be selecting the different types of models suitable for that particular application. So that will be done. So it depends upon the companies to decide which type of a model will be decided by proper analysis only. So here comes the disadvantage of iterative model. As I said, it is useful for the large projects. It is not suitable for the small projects. And one more thing here, second disadvantage is more number of resources will be requiring here, because iteration is done many number of times. Iterations are many number of times. So every time there will be lot of manpower will be needed, lot of cost will be involving, lot of resources will be added on it. So what happens here is more number of resources will be involving. Along with that, budget will be also increasing. So that is what the disadvantages lies here. And you see the third disadvantage, design can be changed again and again because of imperfect requirements. It means that in the first iteration, we have some requirements. It means that in the second iteration, some more requirements have been gathered. So what do you mean by this? Previous requirements will be overridden by the new requirements. So it will be a continuous process in the iteration development model. So it represents that requirements are not perfect yet. We are saying requirements are not perfect because the customer needs more number of things into it. So next disadvantage, requirement changes can cause over budget, as I said, because it may also increase the budget of the development because more number of resources have been used. And one more thing, that is a disadvantage, project completion date not confirmed because of changing requirements. This is the main drawback here. Because if we are keep on changing, if you are keep on adding the requirements, when the final output will be given to the customer, that is what the main drawback here. There is no confirmed date for the project completion because of this kind of strategy, that is iterative development strategy. So this is what happens with the iterative development model. I think everyone understood these points. So same iterative model can be understood in a different way. In another form, we can understand the iterative development model as this thing. First iteration does the requirements. First iteration does the requirements and architecture in the waterfall model way. So what is the second form of iterative development is the initial requirements and the architecture design will be done in the waterfall model way, and the development and delivery are done in the incremental way or in the terms of iterations. So as I said, iterative development model is a combination of waterfall and prototyping model. So here waterfall model is used here. Based on the requirements, architecture will be designed based on the waterfall model. And after that, iterations will be used. The regular iteration model will be used. So this is the second form of iteration development. What happens here is when you are going with the waterfall model, requirements will be freezed there initially and architecture will be designed there. And after that, design phase will come. From the design phase, what happens here is iteration type of a thing will be happening. So this is what the diagram shows us, the iterative, another form of iteration, that is user needs will be gathered in the form of requirements and the architecture will be designed, and the outcome of this thing is requirement specification plus architecture will be given to the input, is given as inputs, will be given as inputs for the iteration strategy here. Here the development iteration will be starting here. Existing software will be there. There will be a feedback given by the iterations. Then development starts. The first iteration, select the requirements, enhance the design, build it, test it, and release the software. This is another form of iteration. That is the second form of iteration, development. So this is about our iterative development model. I think everyone understood this thing. If you have any doubts, please raise the questions or else message me, text me. I will send you the PPT also. So it is less than 2 minutes. So I am not continuing with the next model. I will stop here itself. And one more thing, from the next class onwards, please try to join as early as possible. See, now also there are somebody keep on joining into that classes. So make sure that you will be joining early. And for today, only iterative model. In the next class, I am discussing about rational unified process model, time boxing model, and other models also. Hope everyone understood this. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, sir.